Today's poetry lesson is on prosody, or the mechanical characteristics of poetry. Now, prosody is a collective term that we use to describe the technical aspects of poetry. So that could be that'll be the rhythm and where you stress the syllables, where you don't stress the syllables, and what meter you use. So the first thing we're going to be talking about is meter, and meter is the syllabic repetition of syllables. A poem's rhythm is defined by the meter that it uses, and we're going to be talking about the different types and kinds of meters that we could have in a poem. So, poetic meter can be categorized into four basic types, and they are quantitative, syllabic, accentual, and accentual syllabic. We're going to be talking about these four. So, quantitative meter is it's a special type of meter. It's determined by how long it takes to read a line of poetry. So the number of syllables in it is actually irrelevant because, the rhythm is determined by how long it takes to say a line. This is primarily in Greek or Latin, and this works because in those languages, syllables aren't necessarily the same length as each other. And this type of meter is not at all common in English poetry because in English, a syllable is generally the same length of time as the next syllable. So for that reason, we don't see quantitative meter very much in English poetry. Okay, so the second kind of poetic meter is what's called syllabic meter, and that is where the rhythm is determined by how many syllables are in an individual line of poetry. This is more common in languages with evenly stressed syllables, which, by the way, English is not. So this doesn't show up a whole lot very often in English either, but it does work fairly well. As you can see with this poem by Thomas Nash, every line has 6 syllables. It really doesn't deviate from that. Adieu, farewell, earthless, this world uncertain is. But it works better in evenly stressed languages. I think Japanese is an example of an evenly stressed language, and I think that's why any haiku might be a good example of syllabic meter because every haiku has the same number of syllables in every single line. The third type of poetic meter is a little strange. It's called accentual, and the pattern is of reliant entirely upon what syllables are stressed and what syllables are not stressed. This works best in languages like German or Middle English, like this poem here, Piers Pullman by William Langland. And if you listen to this poem, it's strange because the rhythmic feeling doesn't come from time. It comes from what's stressed and unstressed. In a summer season, om softa was the sana, I sjukni inte sjudes as I skipboara, and habita as in hermita unholy of workers, with vida in this world, wondrous hard. It's strange, but it does convey a feeling of rhythm, but not through what we would traditionally consider rhythm. It's just what syllables are stressed and unstressed. We don't see this a whole lot in modern English either. Now we get to the type of meter that we actually do use a lot in modern English, and that's accentual syllabic. And as you can probably tell from the name, it's equal parts what syllables are accented and how many syllables are in a line. So this is unique because it uses something called a foot, and a foot is a unit of measurement, usually about 2 or 3 syllables, and it forms the basic unit that builds up each poetic line. So an example of accentual syllabic meter is really well found to be in Edward Gorey's The Ghastly Crumb Tinies. Yes. A is for Amy, who fell down the stairs. B is for Basil, assaulted by bears. It's a very dark poem, but you can see how there's a very clearly stressed syllables and a very clear consistency in the syllabic structure. So we did briefly mention what a metrical foot was when we were talking about accentual syllabic meter. So now we're going to talk about a little bit more about what different kinds of metrical feet there are. So recall that a metrical foot is a unit of syllables that are put together in a line of poetry to create the meter. So the first one we have is an iamb. So a poem is considered to be iambic when the main metrical foot that it uses is an iamb. An iamb consists of one short and one long syllable, or one stressed and one unstressed syllable. I'm sorry, other way around. One unstressed and one stressed syllable directly after each other. So here's one example by Emily Dickinson. If you were coming in the fall, every second syllable is stressed, and that's an iamb. Then we get into anapestic poetry, which uses an anapest. And an anapest consists of two unstressed syllables followed by one stressed syllable. So here's an example by Lord Byron. And the eyes of the sleepers wax deadly and chill. Every third syllable is stressed. Up next, we have a trochee, or trochaic poetry, and that's just the opposite of an iamb. So it's one stressed followed by a single unstressed. You're probably sick to death of hearing this line of poetry, but fair is foul and foul is fair. It's a pretty good example of a trochaic line of poetry. So just like a trochee is the opposite of an iamb, a dactyl is the opposite of an anapest. So that's one stressed syllable followed by two unstressed syllables. And here's one from Alfred Lord Tennyson, our old friend. Cannon in front of them volleyed and thundered. Makes a pretty good example of dactylic poetry. Accentual syllabic poetry is not just defined by what kind of metrical foot that it puts in its lines of poetry, but how many metrical feet goes in each line of poetry. And that's the next bit we're going to be talking about. So first we have a monometer, and if you're any good with your Greek and Latin roots, you can tell mono is one. So there's literally 1 foot, or two or three syllables each, per line of poetry. So Desmond Skiro wrote Ode on a Grecian Urn, and that's a pretty good example of monometer, because every line has just one metrical foot in it. So God's chase, round vase, what say, what play, don't know, nice though. Next we have dimeter. You can probably tell where this is going. We're going to change the Latin roots of every word until we get up to the numbers that we're going up to. It's pretty straightforward. But dimeter, di is 2, so that's 2 metrical feet for every line. For example, even out Earth's Rockville Flat, Eiger Blent, the Grand Canyon. That's 2 feet for every line. Continuing our pattern, we have trimeter, which is 3 metrical feet per line. So for example, the whiskey on your breath could make a small boy dizzy, but I hung on like death. Such waltzing was not easy. So I did try to accent certain syllables when I was reading that just now, so that you would be able to tell, where each meter ended. I hope you were able to tell that there were clearly 3 metrical foots in each line of poetry there. After trimeter comes tetrameter, which is 4 feet per line. And continuing on with that, we have pentameter, which is going to give us 5 feet per line. It is the most common meter used in accentual syllabic poetry. It is very commonly seen when used with the iamb. Iambic pentameter is very commonly seen in English poetry. After pentameter, we have hexameter, which is 6 feet per line, and even after that, we have heptameter, which is 7 feet per line. Presumably, you could go up to octameter or dodecameter or icosameter if you really wanted to, but we're not going to go that high. No reason to just make more slides and keep recording pointless voiceover. So we're just going to stop at heptameter. Alright, that concludes our little poetry lesson today on prosody. I do apologize for the background noise. I wasn't able to get a super quiet place to record this. So, good luck with your poetry, and I hope you have a nice day. Goodbye.